Welcome. I'm Andy Kaufman. Glad you could join me today. My neighbor is in today, so I have to keep it down a little bit. When I first went off to college, I didn't enjoy it very much, and so I quit and came back home. I'd gone back to Kansas, to Heston, Kansas, to go to college. The next year, I went to another college and I did okay in classes, but then I got into a little trouble and the school asked me to leave. So I did. The third year, I roomed with the same guy I roomed with in high school, who will remain nameless, but most of you know who he is. And we spent more time down at Dixon Rec Center at Oregon State than we did going to class. And I was in the computer science department at the time, and I would show up for class once in a while, and lo and behold, there'd be a midterm. And so I would have to try to take the midterm when I had never gone to class and didn't read anything. So eventually, the computer science department asked me to leave, but fortunately, the business school was willing to take me in. The next year, I stayed at Oregon State and did the business program. But I realized I was wasting time and money, and so I quit going to college and just went to work. And years later, I finally got my act together and finished up college at Portland State. It helped a lot that I had gotten married and had kids by then. Brenda says I need to turn up my volume. I'm not sure how to do that. I'll try to talk louder. Uh, so it helped that I had gotten married and had kids, and so that's some good motivation there. Uh, and I had to take a lot of those same classes over again because I had gotten D's in the classes, and they wouldn't transfer when you get D's. So this put my idea of going to law school in jeopardy because GPA is one of the things they look at when you are trying to get into law school. But my undergraduate GPA didn't reflect my ability, but reflected the fact that I was lazy and not very committed to going to class. My GPA at Portland State was much better. So the kind people at Lewis and Clark Law School had mercy on me and let me in. But if I had not gone to law school and finished, I would not have had the hobby of going to Dallas Seminary to study theology, and I would not be speaking to you today. But first, I had to overcome my flaws before I could finish in those programs. If you're lazy, you're not going to do very well in law school. Uh, so I did. I overcame them with God's help and with the help of others around me. I mentioned my wife before. Another man whom I worked for at the time, he encouraged me and he even helped pay for my undergrad program. Otherwise, it would have been very difficult to finish. Uh, Brenda says she can't hear me, but my sister Roma says she can hear me. So I'm not sure what to do there. Maybe Brenda ought to turn up her volume a little bit. Well, last time we saw how Israel demanded a king from Samuel, Israel's last judge. Samuel was distressed by this demand, but God told him to go ahead and give them a king. Now in chapter 9, we see the beginning of the process for God to provide a king for Israel. And even though it was wrong for Israel to ask for a king, they wanted a king so they could be like all the other nations. God's going to give them the ideal person to be a king, at least from their perspective. And Saul could have been a great king, but his character flaws and failure to obey God will catch up with him in the end. And we'll see this over the next few chapters. And one of the purposes of 1st and 2nd Samuel is for us to consider the examples of people like Saul so that we can live our lives accordingly. Either we follow their good examples or we avoid their poor examples. And Saul will give us a lot of examples of how not to live. And so, like Saul, God may choose us for something despite our character flaws. But these flaws, if we don't sanctify them, if we don't allow God to sanctify them, will turn out to be the seeds of our failures. And so this is 1 Samuel 9, 1 to 27 today. But let's start by reading 9, 1 to 14, and then we'll read 15 to 27 later on. And so if you have a Bible, you can flip to 1 Samuel 9, 1 to 14. And I don't think I can turn up my microphone here. No, I don't know how to do that. So we'll have to carry on. I hope you can hear me okay. I don't want to disturb my neighbor either. All right, 1 Samuel 9, 1 to 14. There was a Benjamite man named Kish, son of Abiel, the son of Zeror, the son of Bechorath, the son of Aphiah of Benjamin. Kish was a prominent person. He had a son named Saul, a handsome young man. There was no one among the Israelites more handsome than he was. He stood head and shoulders above all the people. The donkeys of Saul's father Kish wandered off, so Kish said to his son Saul, "Take one of the servants with you and go look for the donkeys." So Saul crossed through the hill country of Ephraim, passing through the land of Cilicia, but they did not find them. So they crossed through the land of Shaalim, but they were not there. Then they crossed through the land of Benjamin, and still they did not find them. When they came to the land of Zuph, Saul said to his servant who was with him, "Come on, let's head back before my father quits worrying about the donkeys and becomes anxious about us." But the servant said to him, "Look, there is a man of God in this town. He is highly respected. Everything he says really happens. Now let's go there. Perhaps he will tell us where we should go from here." So Saul said to his servant, "All right, we can go, but what can we bring the man since the food in our bags is used up? We have no gift to take to the man of God. What do we have?" The servant went on to answer Saul, "Look, I happen to have in my hand a quarter shekel of silver. I will give it to the man of God, and he will tell us where we should go." Now it used to be in Israel that whenever someone went to inquire of God, he would say, "Come on, let's go to the seer." For today's prophet used to be called a seer. So Saul said to his servant, "That's a good idea. Come on, let's go." So they went to the town where the man of God was. As they were going up the ascent to the town, they met some girls coming out to draw water. They said to them, "Is this where the seer is?" They replied, "Yes, straight ahead. But hurry now, for he came to the town today, and the people are making the sacrifice at the high place. When you enter the town, you can find him before he goes up to the high place to eat. The people won't eat until he arrives, for he must bless the sacrifice. Once that happens, those who have been invited will eat. Now go up, for this is the time when you can find him." Well, in this first section, we see that despite Saul's many advantages, the challenges he faces reveals his true character. Now, Saul had many advantages. He was from the right family, he was good looking, and he was tall. And so, from the human perspective, he was the perfect fit to be king. That's what the people wanted. He was from the right family. Verse 1 says that there was a Benjamite man named Kish, son of Abiel, son of Zeror, the son of Bechereth, the son of Aphiah of Benjamin. He was a prominent person. And so Saul's father, Kish, was a prominent person. And the Hebrew is Gabor Kail, and this is the same term that was referred to Boaz back in the book of Ruth. Gabor means great, and Kail indicates a wealthy landowner, maybe someone who's competent. It can refer to class, and so Kish is an important landowner. He's in the upper class, and so he's a prominent person because he is a wealthy landowner. And so his son would be a likely or logical prospect to be king. He's from an important family, and that would gain a lot of support from among the people. And we often look to see what family a person comes from. We aren't the British, who actually have a royal family, and there's a line of succession for their king or their queen. And some respects, it doesn't matter how good of a king you'll be. If you're Charles, you're next in line, and hopefully he'll turn out to be a good king. But even in our society, if you're from a prominent family, you have a better chance of getting into the right university or graduate school. You have a better chance of getting the right job, and this gives you all kinds of advantages in work and later on in life. Well, Saul was also good looking. It says that Saul was handsome, and there was no one among the Israelites that was more handsome than Saul was. And so actually good looks can still be an advantage in life. And according to studies, beautiful people are more persuasive. Companies with good-looking executives have higher sales. I don't know why that would be. Beautiful people have an advantage in politics, especially because everything's on TV now, online. Beautiful people are perceived as more likable and trustworthy. But these things aren't necessarily true just because people are good looking. It's just the way that we perceive them. And so if you are good looking, you have a bit of a head start over the regular people who aren't quite so good looking. It's true in high school, it's true in life. Being tall also provides advantages, and Saul was tall. It says that he stood head and shoulders above all the people, and so he's quite a bit taller than most of the people. But being tall has advantages too. Tall people end up being more successful on average. Tall people might be paid more at work just because they're tall, and tall people are seen as more confident. And these advantages too come about because of the way people perceive us if we happen to be tall. But there are some real benefits of being tall. There's a small correlation between height and IQ, if you can believe that. The risk of diabetes is lower for tall women, and tall people are less likely to have dementia and have a lower risk for having heart disease. So there are actually real advantages. It can be good to be tall. And apparently being around 6 foot tall is tall for a woman, and being 6'1" or 6'2" is tall for a man. And so luckily I happen to be 6'2". So if someone was looking at Saul, they would think he was a perfect fit to be a good king. He was from a good family, he was good looking, and he was tall. And that's the kind of things that we look at. And so when we look at ourselves or we look at other people, what criteria do we use to determine if they are a good fit for a job or a certain role? Do we judge people based on their external appearances? And we might throw in race or gender into the equation. Do we judge people based on their race or their gender? Are we ourselves judged because of any of these attributes? Are we judging people because of these attributes? James writes in 2 1 to 4, he says, "My brothers and sisters, do not show prejudice if you possess faith in our glorious Lord Jesus Christ. For if someone comes into your assembly wearing a gold ring and fine clothing, and a poor person enters in filthy clothes, do you pay attention to the one who is finely dressed and say, 'Hey, you sit over here in a good place,' and to the poor person, 'You stand over there or sit on the floor'? If so, you not made distinctions among yourselves and become judges with evil motives?" And so this is making distinctions based on someone's wealth and how they dress. But it could just as easily apply to many other kind of attributes that we make distinctions on. Now, there are certainly times when we have to make distinctions between people, but we should make distinctions based on attributes that matter. My own church here in Canby is in the process of finding a new pastor, and there's another large church up the road from us a little ways where we went many years ago. I still get emails from them. They're looking for a pastor too. And hopefully, these churches won't pick a pastor based on what family he comes from or how good looking or how tall he is. Those attributes might be advantages, but a pastor search committee ought to look at character and not outward appearances. Both of those churches will probably look for a man to be a pastor. That's one of the distinctions that the churches find to be relevant or biblical when picking a senior pastor. Excuse me. And we could say the same thing about politicians. We're in an election year this year, and so we should try to look at the candidate's character and their skill and not at superficial things. Well, challenges will end up revealing Saul's true character, and they will reveal ours too. In verses 3 and 4, we get kind of Saul's journey looking for the donkeys. So the donkeys of Saul's father Kish wander off, and so Kish says to his son Saul, "Take one of the servants with you and go look for the donkeys." And so Saul crossed through the hill country of Ephraim, passing through the land of Cilicia, but they did not find them. So they crossed through the land of Shalim, but they were not there. When he crossed through the land of Benjamin, they still did not find them. And so one commentator says that Saul is presented as kind of a bumbler. Perhaps he was supposed to be watching the donkeys and they escaped because he didn't do his job. But nevertheless, Saul and his servant wander all over the countryside, but they do not find the donkeys. The first character defect that is mentioned is in verses 5 and 6, and it's that he's ready to give up very quickly. And so it says in 5 and 6, when they came to the land of Zuph, Saul said to his servant who was with him, "Come on, let's head back before my father quits worrying about the donkeys and becomes anxious about us." But the servant says to him, "Well, look, there's a man of God who lives in this town. He is highly respected. Everything he says really happens. Now let's go there. Perhaps he will tell us where we should go from here." And so the precise area of where they traveled is not known, but according to verse 20, the search lasted for 3 days, and that gives us an idea of how far they had traveled. We can see the search was extensive, but it was futile. And so Saul is ready to give up. And he suggests a good reason to give up. Let's go home because my dad will start worrying about us. But the servant suggests that they go and ask the man of God. And so that's how it will be with us. We will try to do what we think we should or what God wants us to do, but the effort will seem long and futile. And we will often want to give up and will come up with excuses to do so. I had lots of excuses for not going to class and not finishing school. Uh, well, one of Saul's other character flaws is that it doesn't even occur to him to go ask God what to do. Uh, Hopefully, it will occur to us to pray about something before we give up and even go and ask advice from godly people that we know. And luckily for Saul, he had this servant with him who comes across as much more capable and much more spiritual than Saul. He does not want to give up, and he knows that there's a man of God that they can go talk to. Well, what would Saul have missed out on if he had been successful in giving up the search and had returned home? He might have missed out on being king of Israel. But God had providentially provided one of the servants to go along with Saul and keep Saul on track with what God intended. And maybe we'll have such a person in our lives, or perhaps we can be such a person to someone else. Encourage someone not to give up, encourage them to seek answers from God before they do give up. So Saul is ready to give up, and he doesn't know. He doesn't go talk to God. Another character defect is that Saul makes excuses, and we just saw that he was going to excuse giving up the search for the donkeys because his dad might have been worried about him. Now it says in verses 7 to 10, Saul says to his servant, "All right, we can go, but what can we bring to the man since the food in our bags is used up? We have no gift to take to the man of God. What do we have?" The servant went on to answer Saul, "Well, look, I happen to have in my hand a quarter shekel of silver. I will give it to the man of God, and he will tell us where we should go." Now, it used to be in Israel that whenever someone went to inquire of God, he would say, "Come on, let's go to the seer," for today's prophet used to be called a seer. So Saul said to his servant, "That's a good idea. Come on, let's go." So they went to the town where the man of God was. So the fact that Saul wants to honor the man of God by bringing him something, that's a good character trait. But he's unprepared, and so he has nothing to offer. And maybe he would have given up going to see the man of God because he didn't have anything to give him. But luckily, again, his servant has a quarter shekel of silver and offers to give that to the man of God. And then we have in verse 9 a little helpful explanation that in the past, when someone wanted to inquire of God, they would say, "Come on, let's go to the seer," because the man who is called a prophet today used to be called a seer. And so that tells us that 1 Samuel was written well after the events that it describes, because certain language needs to be explained to the readers. Saul sees that his servant has a good plan, and so they go to where the man of God lives. Now, verses 11 to 14 could either be a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. It says, as they were going up the ascent to town, they met some girls coming out to draw water. And they said to him, "Is this where the seer is?" They replied, "Yes, straight ahead. But hurry now, for he came to the town today, and the people are making a sacrifice at the high place. When you enter the town, you can find him before he goes up to the high place to eat. The people won't eat until he arrives, for he must bless the sacrifice. Once that happens, those who have been invited will eat. Now go on up, for this is the time when you can find him." And so Saul and his servant have to ask for directions from a group of girls. That shows humility on Saul's part, asking for directions from girls, nonetheless. And so that's good. Saul is humble enough to ask for directions from a group of girls. But the fact that he doesn't know where the seer lives shows that he lacks spirituality, because you would think he would know where the seer lived, where Samuel lives, because Samuel was a prominent person. Uh, so the incident also shows how God is in control of things. There's this feast that's been scheduled for when Samuel arrives in town. Saul and his servant have been out looking for donkeys, and they just happen to arrive in town at exactly the right time to be part of this feast. If the donkeys had not gotten lost, or if they had managed to find them, or if Saul had managed to give up like he wanted to, they would never have gone to find the man of God. If they had arrived a day earlier, Samuel would not have been there. If they had arrived a day later, Samuel might have been gone. And so God is behind the scenes orchestrating the circumstances to accomplish what his purposes are. So that's the first section. We see Saul's character deflects and how they might have affected his opportunity to be king. And then in 15 to 27, Saul meets with Samuel and God begins to work out his plan. And so let's read that part, 15 to 27. So they went up to the town. As they were heading for the middle of the town, Samuel was coming in their direction to go up to the high place. Now, the day before Saul arrived, the Lord had told Samuel, "At this time tomorrow I will send you a man from the land of Benjamin. You must consecrate him as a leader over my people Israel. He will save my people from the hand of the Philistines. For I have looked with favor on my people. Their cry has reached me." When Samuel saw Saul, the Lord said, "Here is the man I told you about. He will rule over my people." As Saul approached Samuel in the middle of the gate, he said, "Please tell me where the seer's house is." Samuel replied to Saul, "I am the seer. Go up in front of me to the high place. Today you will eat with me, and in the morning I will send you away. I will tell you everything you are thinking. Don't be concerned about the donkeys that you have lost 3 days ago, for they have been found. Whom does all Israel desire? Is it not you and all your father's family?" Saul replied, "Am I not a Benjamite, from the smallest of Israel's tribes, and is not my family clan the smallest of all the clans in the tribe of Benjamin? Why do you speak to me in this way?" Then Samuel brought Saul and his servant into the room and gave them a place at the head of those who had been invited. There were about 30 people present. Samuel said to the cook, "Give me the portion of meat that I gave to you, the one I asked you to keep with you." So the cook picked up the leg and brought it and set it in front of Saul. Samuel said, "What has kept is now set before you. Eat, for it has been kept for you for this meeting time, from the time I said, 'I have invited the people.'" So Saul ate with Samuel that day. When they came down from the high place to the town, Samuel spoke with Saul on the roof. They got up at dawn, and Samuel called to Saul on the roof, "Get up so I can send you on your way." So Saul got up, and the two of them, he and Samuel, went outside. While they were going down to the edge of town, Samuel said to Saul, "Tell the servant to go on ahead of us." So he did. Samuel then said, "You remain here a while so I can inform you of God's message." So first of all, God tells Samuel that he's sending Saul to him. That's verses 15 and 16, which goes back to the day before. And God had told Samuel, "At this time tomorrow, I will send you a man from the land of Benjamin, and you will consecrate him as leader over my people. He will save my people from the hand of the Philistines, for I have looked with favor on my people. Their cry has reached me." And so when the people demanded a king, They were rejecting God as their king, but God still cares for them, and he is going to send them a king, like they asked, to help them with their enemies. And so God is listening to their cries, even though they have rejected him. And that's a very good thing about God, because we often act in the same way. We reject God, but he still cares for us. And he'll look out for us. He'll help us with our life. He'll help us with our enemies. Uh, but even though God is working all these things out, we observe that Saul lacks spiritual awareness. And this is one of the seeds of his ultimate downfall. And so when Samuel sees Saul, God says, well, here's the man I told you about yesterday. And then Saul approaches Samuel and says, please tell me where the seer's house is. Now, Samuel was a prominent person in Israel. He was a priest and a judge. And so you would think that Saul's family would have gone to where the tabernacle was to make sacrifices and worship God, and that Saul would therefore know who Samuel is. But Saul does not know where Samuel lives or what he looks like. And so that suggests that Saul's family did not spend very much time at church, so to speak. And, you know, if we don't recognize our pastor, then we probably are not going to church often enough. And if we're not going to church, then we are not receiving any of the teaching or accountability that we would find there, and we're not interacting with other Christians. And so that's a recipe for missing out on God's will for our lives, and for making foolish choices like Saul will end up doing here. Now, some people are not able to go to church, and so I'm not talking to them. So we should be making God a priority in our own lives. Then in 19 to 20, Samuel begins to reveal God's plan for Saul. And he tells him what happens to the donkeys, for one thing. Samuel says, well, I'm the seer. Go before me up to the high place, and today you'll eat with me, and in the morning I will send you on your way. I will tell you everything that you are thinking. But don't be concerned about the donkeys that you lost 3 days ago, for they have been found. Whom does Israel desire? Is it not you and all of your father's family? So now that Saul has arrived, Samuel is going to reveal God's plans to him. And first he says he will eat with Samuel that night, and then he'll explain things to him. And to start out, he tells him that the donkeys have been found, so he doesn't need to worry about them anymore. And then he basically says, well, you're going to be Israel's king. And Samuel's a prophet, and he proves this because he knows what happened to the donkeys. And Saul should feel pretty good about Samuel saying that he is the one that Israel desires. But Saul's still unsure, and he replies and says, well, wait a minute, am I not a Benjaminite from the smallest of Israel's tribes? And is not my family the smallest of all the tribes of Benjamin? Why do you speak to me in this way? And so it doesn't seem like Saul understands that Samuel is a prophet and that he's speaking on behalf of God. It also doesn't say that Samuel answered Saul's question, but he does show him, and that's in verses 22 to 24. Samuel brought Saul and his servant into the room and gave them a place at the head of those who had been invited. There were about 30 people present. Samuel said to the cook, give me the portion of meat I gave to you, the one I asked you to keep with you. So the cook picked up the leg and brought it and set it before Saul. Samuel said, what was kept is now set before you. Eat, for it has been kept for you for this meeting time from the time I said, I have invited the people. So Saul ate with Samuel that day. Excuse me. So Samuel does two things. He puts Saul at the servant at the head of the table. It's a position of honor. And then he had the cook prepare a special meat special piece of meat for Saul to eat. And this is a piece of meat that Samuel had set aside before when he had invited the people. And then Saul, sitting at the head of the table, eats this special piece of meat in the presence of these other people, 30 people, probably the elders and other prominent men from the town, from the area. And so they would know from this setup that Saul was a very special person in Samuel's eyes, and therefore in God's eyes. And Samuel does not just show Saul that he's special, he also tells him. And that's in verses 25 to 27. So they finished the meal that night. When they come down from the high place to the town, Samuel spoke with Saul on the roof. They got up at dawn, and Samuel called to Saul on the roof, "Get up so I can send you on your way." So Saul got up, and the two of them, he and Samuel, went outside. While they were going down to the edge of town, Samuel said to Saul, "Tell the servant to go on ahead of us." So he did. Samuel then said, "You remain here a while so I can inform you of God's message." So Samuel speaks with Saul that night after the meal, and then the next day, as they were leaving, Samuel has Saul send the servant on ahead so that he can give him God's message. And so that's where we'll pick up next time, if you tune back in. Excuse me. Well, my character flaws of laziness and wanting to give up easily could have had dire consequences in my life. With God's help and with the help of some people who love me, I was able to overcome my character flaws and have had a reasonably successful life up to now. As we read 1st and 2nd Samuel, then let's consider the example of people like Saul so that we can live our own lives accordingly, following their good examples and avoiding their poor examples. We also have the example of Samuel in this story, the example of Saul's servant, and we'll have David coming up in the future. Plus, we can observe the people around us, and we can learn from their good examples and from their bad examples. God will sanctify our character flaws and use us to accomplish his purposes if we let him. But even when we fail, he still loves us and he will help us overcome. So that's the end of the passage. Let's have a word of prayer, and then I think we probably have time for a song today, so we'll have a song. So join me in prayer, would you? Father, thank you for your working in my life, the people you brought in to help me along the way. Thank you for your help along the way. Thank you for the stories we have of Saul and Samuel and David and how we can learn from them how to live for you. Pray your blessing on all the people tuning in, that they would find people to help them as well, that you would help them become more and more like Jesus. And we pray all this in his name. Amen. Amen. All right, here's a song for today. Great is thy faithfulness, O God, my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassions, they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever wilt be. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning new mercies I see. All I have needed thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord. summer and winter and springtime and harvest, sun, moon, and stars in their courses above. Join with all nature in manifold witness to thy great faithfulness, mercy, and love. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning new mercies I see. All I have needed thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Pardon for sin and a peace that endureth, thine own dear presence to cheer and to guide, strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow. Blessings all mine with 10,000 beside. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning new mercies I see. All I have needed thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. All right. Well, thanks again for tuning in. And I forgot to mention, I am baptizing someone later this afternoon. And so you could pray for that person. Thankful that he was asking to be baptized. And so we'll have someone else joining the family of God. Well, they've already joined, but we're going to have baptism for a public acknowledgement of that fact. So thanks again for tuning in. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.